His hand closed around my throat, not to hurt, but to force my chin up, to make me look at him. The silver chain of the moon crest bit into my skin, a cold counterpoint to the burning fury in Ian's eyes. His voice was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards, through my bones. The entire pack had gone silent, a sea of shocked faces frozen around us. I could see James in the periphery, his expression unreadable. Ian's thumb brushed the etched silver pendant, the one I'd found, the one I'd worn for luck. This was hers. I gave this to her. The accusation in his tone was a physical blow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with blood. It started with a delivery and a scent that changed everything. Where are you watching from, packmate? Don't miss a single moment of this moonlit drama. Subscribe and howl your support. The scent of old paper and impending rain was shattered by the coppery tang of blood. I froze on the worn stone steps of the Lunar Archives, the heavy delivery crate in my arms suddenly forgotten. The wind shifted, slicing down the mountain pass and carrying the smell straight to me, fresh, visceral, and utterly out of place here among the quiet scholars and historical ledgers. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. Trouble in the neutral territory of the archives was as rare as a silent, "Victoria, you planning on holding that box all day, or are you bringing in the new acquisitions?" Faith's voice, sharp with impatience, floated from the open doorway behind me. I didn't turn. "Do you smell that?" "Smell what?" "Dust and your procrastination." She came to stand beside me, a shorter woman with clever eyes that missed little. Her own smile faded as she inhaled. "Oh, it wasn't. Neutral ground or not, my instincts, the ones I kept carefully leashed and quiet, were prickling. A low-grade alarm buzzed in my veins. "Stay here," I murmured, lowering the crate onto the steps. "Like hell," Faith whispered. But she stayed put as I moved down the path, following the scent trail like a thread of crimson silk on the gray air. It led around the side of the massive stone building, to the secluded grove of aspen trees where scholars sometimes went to think. The scene wasn't a massacre. It was a message. A young wolf from the Pine Ridge pack. Calvin, I remembered his name, a gentle boy who liked botany texts, was slumped against a tree trunk, clutching a bleeding gash across his forearm. His face was pale, but his eyes blazed with more anger than fear. Standing over him, radiating a contempt so cold it felt like winter, was James. James of the Stone Peak pack. Ian's head enforcer. His posture was relaxed, but his hands were stained red. "Understand your place," James was saying, his voice smooth as oiled stone. "Running errands for the archives is one thing. Sniffing—" "I was collecting moss samples," Calvin protested, his voice tight with pain. "And I'm pruning a tree," James said, flexing his fingers. "Consider yourself pruned." I didn't think. I just stepped into the clearing. "The archives are neutral ground, James. You're bleeding on it." Both men turned. Calvin's eyes widened with hope. James's narrowed into icy slits. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. The old title, always delivered with that mocking lilt, should have rolled off me by now. It never quite did. "I am currently cataloging violations of the Accords. Assault on a researcher qualifies." I kept my voice flat, moving to kneel beside Calvin. The wound was clean but deep. "Faith," I called out, not taking my eyes off James. "We need the first aid kit." "Playing nurse," James mused, watching me. I ignored him, using the clean hem of my shirt to apply pressure to Calvin's arm. "Hold this." "He's going to tell his alpha," Calvin hissed, glaring at James. "Oh, I'm counting on it," James said. He took a step closer, and his shadow fell over us. The scent of his aggression, cold and metallic, mixed with the blood. "Let Ian see what happens when lesser packs forget their station. Let him see the consequence." A new scent hit the air then, washing over the clearing like a thunderclap. It was pine and frost and raw, untamed power. It was a scent that made the very air crackle, that made my own hidden instincts sit up and howl in a confusing mix of terror and recognition. James stiffened, his smirk vanishing. I didn't need to look, I felt him. "The only consequence I see, James," a voice said, deep and resonant, "is you explaining why you're defiling neutral territory." Alpha of the Stone Peak Pack. He stood at the edge of the grove, having moved with a silence that belied his size. He wasn't looking at James or at Calvin. His gaze, the color of a storm cloud, was fixed on me. On my hands, stained with Calvin's blood, pressed against the wound. The intensity of his focus was a physical weight. James recovered quickly, dipping his head in a show of respect that didn't reach his eyes. "Alpha, this pup was trespassing. I was merely reminding him of the boundaries." "With your claws?" Ian's question was deceptively quiet. He finally shifted his gaze to James, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop. "In the archives, Grove. You think our laws are suggestions, enforcer?" "Of course not, Alpha." James's jaw tightened. "I acted to protect our interests. Your interests have just cost us a month's trading rights with the Lunar Archives," Ian said, his tone final. "Report to the den. Now. We will discuss your zeal." For a heartbeat, James looked like he might argue. His eyes flicked to me, a flash of pure venom before he bowed again, turned, and melted into the trees. The oppressive cold of his presence lifted, leaving only the electric, unsettling storm of Ian. Ian then turned to Calvin. "Your injury will be seen to by our healer. Your pack will be compensated. This breach is on me." His apology, for that's what it was, held the weight of stone. Calvin just nodded, mute. Then Ian was standing before me. I rose slowly, wiping my hands on my trousers, feeling inexplicably exposed under his scrutiny. Faith arrived with the medical kit, stopping short at the sight of the Alpha. She attended to Calvin, her movements hurried. "You intervened," Ian said. "It wasn't a question." "It was the right thing to do," I replied, my voice. "James is not known for his tolerance of righteous intervention." He took another step closer. I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. His scent was overwhelming up close, a wild, rugged landscape that made my head spin. "You're the archivist, Victoria. I've seen you here." He knew my name. The fact shouldn't have sent a jolt through me. "I am." "You have courage or a death wish." A flicker of something, not amusement, something darker, more intrigued, passed in his eyes. "Which is it?" Before I could fashion a retort, his attention dropped. Not to my face, but to my neck. His entire body went perfectly, predatorily still. The storm in his eyes solidified into something shockingly like disbelief. My hand flew to my throat, to the simple silver necklace I always wore. The moon crest pendant, a piece I'd found tucked in a forgotten box of donated artifacts years ago. It was beautiful, old, and it felt like mine. I'd worn it every day since. Ian's hand came up, not to touch me, but to hover near the silver crest. His expression was that of a man seeing a ghost. "Where?" he breathed, the word barely a sound, yet it echoed in the silent grove. "Where did you get that?" The cliffhanger of his question hung between us, sharp as a blade. All the tension from James, from the blood, coalesced into this single, terrifying point. His gaze burned into the metal at my throat, and I knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that the moon crest was no simple trinket, and that by wearing it, I had just thrown a lit match into a powder keg I never knew existed. His question hung in the air like a physical blow. "Where did you get that?" His gaze was a brand on my skin, fixed on the silver pendant resting against my sternum. The fury in his eyes had nothing to do with pack law or broken accords. This was personal, primal, and it was aimed directly at me. I took an involuntary step back. my hand flying up to clutch the moon crest. It's familiar. Cool metal was the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted on its axis. It's mine, I said, the words sounding feeble even to my own ears. Yours, Ian repeated the word as if it were a curse. He closed the distance between us in 2 swift strides, his presence overwhelming the quiet grove. Faith gasped beside me, and I heard Calvin's pained breathing hitch. That crest does not belong to you. Where did you, my archivist's mind, trained for cataloging and provenance, scrabbled for the facts? From the collection, years ago, it was in a box of unsorted artifacts donated from a cleared-out estate near the old Northern Pass. There was no provenance card, no listed origin. According to our protocols, after a standard holding period, do not quote your protocols to me, he snarled, cutting me off. His voice was low, a vibration that I felt in my bones. That is a Stone Peak Alpha's crest. It is not unclaimed. It was entrusted. The word entrusted landed with the weight of a tombstone. All I could see was the stark betrayal in his eyes, a betrayal I had somehow committed without ever knowing him. I shook my head, my fingers tightening around the pendant. I didn't know. I found it. I've worn it for 5 years. His jaw clenched. A muscle ticked in his temple. The controlled alpha who had disciplined his enforcer was gone, replaced by something raw and dangerously volatile. He looked from the crest to my face, his scrutiny so intense it felt like he was peeling back layers, searching for a lie I wasn't telling. Anger, hot and defensive, finally pierced my shock. I don't expect you to believe anything. It's the truth. I catalog artifacts for a living, Alpha. I know the difference between a cheap trinket and old silverwork. This was beautiful, and it called to me. No one came for it. I lifted my chin, meeting his furious gaze. A low growl escaped him, not directed as a threat, but an expression of pure, frustrated fury. He looked like he wanted to shake the answers from me. James, who had been standing rigidly to the side, took a half-step forward, his earlier resentment now glowing with a vindictive heat. I told you she was trouble. Snooping, stirring conflict, and now this thievery. Be silent, Ian said, without even glancing at his enforcer. His command was absolute, and James snapped his mouth shut, though his glare promised later retribution. Ian's focus was an inescapable gravity, pulling me back to him. You will come with me. It wasn't a request. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. The archives are neutral ground. I am under their protection. You are wearing a relic of my bloodline, he said, his voice dropping into a deadly calm that was more frightening than his anger. That changes things. The Accords protect neutral scholars, not thieves of sacred pack symbols. You can walk out of this grove with me, now, under my oath of safe passage, or I will have my enforcers formally petition the Archive Council for your custody, citing gross cultural theft. He had me, and he knew it. A formal petition would cause a scandal. The archives prized their neutrality above all. The preservation of peace between the packs was their core mandate. If I became a point of conflict, a known point of conflict, the pressure to hand me over for inter-pack dispute resolution would be immense. My life here, my work, my fragile safety as an unaffiliated Omega. Faith found her voice, small but brave. Alpha Ian, please, Victoria has never caused any trouble. She's the most dedicated archivist we have. There must be a... Ian finally looked away from me, and the slight release of pressure was like coming up for air. The misunderstanding, he said to Faith, is that your colleague has been wearing a piece of my pack's soul around her neck. That ends today. His eyes returned to me. Choose. I looked at Faith's pale, worried face, at Calvin bleeding on the ground, at James's smug contempt. There was no good choice, but one offered a slender thread of agency. Safe passage, I whispered, the words ash in my mouth. "You're on my blood and my breath," he intoned formally, the old words binding him. He gestured toward the path that led away from the archives, deeper into the forest that bordered Stone Peak territory. "Now, Victoria," Faith began. "It's all right," I lied, forcing a steadiness I didn't feel into my voice. "See to Calvin. Inform head archivist Reed of the situation. Tell him I am cooperating with Alpha Ian under oath of safe passage to resolve an artifact provenance issue." It was the best spin I could put on it, a framework of scholarly duty that might offer some protection. I didn't look back as I walked past Ian. I felt his presence fall into step behind me, a silent, powerful shadow. We left the dappled light of the aspen grove and entered the deeper woods. The air grew cooler, the scent of pine and damp earth replacing the delicate aroma of the archives' gardens. I walked automatically, my mind a whirlwind. An Alpha's crest. Entrusted. To whom? Why was it discarded? The questions chased each other in frantic circles. I had always felt a connection to the pendant, a sense of quiet rightness when I wore it. Now that feeling felt like a theft, a haunting. Had I been drawn to it because of what I was? An omega, sensing the power in an Alpha's symbol. The thought sickened me. We walked for what felt like an hour in utter silence, the only sounds our footsteps and the forest around us. He didn't speak, didn't threaten, but his silence was a palpable force. Finally, the trees began to thin, and I saw the outlines of buildings ahead, not a rough encampment, but sturdy log and stone structures. The heart of the Stone Peak Pack. We entered a wide clearing. Wolves paused in their tasks to watch us pass. I felt their stares like physical touches, curious, assessing, hostile. An unaffiliated omega, escorted by their alpha, wearing a look of stark dread. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, on the largest building at the clearing's center. A longhouse with a... Ian led me not to the longhouse, but to a smaller, secluded cabin set slightly apart near the tree line. He opened the door and gestured for me to enter. It was a simple space. A main room with a hearth, a table, 2 chairs, and a door leading to what was likely a bedroom. It was clean, spare, and felt more like an officer's quarters than a cell. "You will wait here," he said, his voice still taut. "Do not attempt to leave. The oath of safe passage holds within these walls, but it does not extend you the freedom of my territory." "Am I a prisoner or a guest?" I asked, turning to face him. "You are a question that needs an answer," he replied cryptically. His eyes dropped to my neck again, and a fresh wave of that agonizing conflict crossed his face, fury, pain, and something else I couldn't name. "The crest. Take it off." My hand went to it again, a reflex. "Why?" "Because it is not yours to wear." The control snapped for an instant, his voice rising. He took a sharp breath, mastering himself. "Because every moment it rests on you is an insult. Remove it. Place it on the table." It felt like tearing off a piece of myself. The chain caught in my hair as I fumbled with the clasp. My fingers, usually so deft with old paper and delicate objects, were clumsy. Finally, the clasp gave way. The weight of the pendant left my skin, and a profound, unexpected sense of loss hollowed me out. I laid the small silver moon on the wooden table. It gleamed, innocent and damning. Ian stared at it as if it were a ghost. He did not touch it. He simply looked, and the pain in his expression was now unmasked, deep and old. "Who did you give it to?" The question left my lips before I could stop it. His gaze lifted from the crest to me, and the vulnerability was gone, sealed behind a wall of impenetrable alpha authority. "That is none of your concern. Your concern is telling me the truth of how it came to be in your possession. Every detail. The estate, the box, the date, everything." And so I told him. I sat in the hard wooden chair and recounted the dry, archival details of a Tuesday afternoon 5 years past. The donor's name, a human family with no known pack ties, the vague description of the estate location, the other contents of the box, tarnished cutlery, a broken locket, I described the moment I'd unwrapped the pendant from a scrap of velvet, the way the silver had felt alive under my touch. I kept my voice flat, professional, divorcing the story from the emotion I now felt. He listened, pacing slowly before the hearth, his back to me for long stretches. When I finished, the cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire he had lit. "It is not possible," he said finally, more to himself than to me. "It would not have been discarded like that. Perhaps the person you gave it to didn't understand its value," I ventured quietly. He turned, and his laugh was a short, harsh sound. "She understood its value perfectly." He stopped, as if realizing he had said too much. The word hung between us. Before he could say more, the cabin door opened without a knock. A woman stood there, tall and strong, with sharp eyes that swept the room and landed on me with immediate disapproval. She was a beta. I could sense it, and she carried an air of ingrained authority. "Alpha," she said, her tone respectful but urgent. "The patrols have reported. Pine Ridge is mobilizing along the eastern border. They're demanding an audience regarding the assault on their pup." Ian's face hardened into the mask of a leader. The tormented man from a moment ago was gone. "Of course they have." He glanced at me, then back to the woman. "Lena, this is Victoria from the Lunar Archives. She is to remain here. See that she has what she needs. No one is to speak with her. No one is to enter. Is that clear?" "Perfectly, Alpha," Lena said, her gaze settling on me with cold efficiency. Ian moved to the table. For a long moment, he looked down at the moon crest. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he picked it up. His large hand closed around it, hiding it from view. He didn't look at me again. "We are not finished," he said, and it was a promise, not a threat. Then he was gone, striding out the door with Lena following, closing it firmly behind them. I heard the distinct sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place on the outside. I was alone. A prisoner in a comfortable cabin, the familiar weight gone from my throat, and the Alpha's final words echoing in the silence. She understood its value perfectly. The revelation was a key turning in a lock, but the door it opened led only into deeper darkness. Who was she? And what had happened to make him look at the crest, and at me for wearing it, with such world-shattering betrayal? The answer, I feared, was a story that had ended in tragedy. And by wearing its symbol, I had just walked onto the stage for its bloody, unfinished second act. The silence after the bolt slid home was absolute. I stood in the center of the cabin, the ghost weight of the pendant still heavy on my chest, its absence a physical ache. Ian's tormented face, the way his voice had broken on the word entrusted, hung in the air like smoke. I was a prisoner because of a story I didn't know, wearing a crest that was never mine. The cabin was well-made, spare but not cruel. A bed, a small table, a cold hearth. A single, high window showed a sliver of darkening sky. I moved to it, standing on the tips of my toes. I could see the edge of the clearing, the sturdy shapes of the longhouse and other buildings. Figures moved with purpose, a tense, organized energy thrumming through the pack. Pine Ridge was mobilizing, because of James, because of Calvin, because an archivist's pet Omega had worn the wrong piece of jewelry. Hours bled together, marked only by the fading light. My mind, trained for research, chewed relentlessly on the fragments I had. A stone peak Alpha's crest, entrusted to a woman, lost for years, found in a box of donated artifacts, tucked between a tarnished silver spoon and a bundle of faded letters in a feminine hand I'd never fully transcribed. Had those letters been hers? A scholar's oversight. I spun, expecting Ian or the coldly efficient Lena. Instead, a young woman, perhaps my age, slipped inside with a tray. She had a wary, open face, her movements quiet. She was a beta. I could sense that much. But without the aggressive dominance that radiated from James or the controlled. "Alpha said you're to be fed," she said, her voice low. She set the tray on the table. Stew, bread, water, simple, hearty fare. "Thank you," I said, not moving from the window. My voice sounded rusty. She hesitated, glancing at the door, then back at me. Her eyes, a warm brown, held more curiosity than hostility. "You're the one from the archives." "I am, Victor." "Maya," she fidgeted with the edge of her tunic. They're saying you had the moon crest." "I did, I found it in the archives." Her eyes widened. "But everyone knows it was lost. Before I was born." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's been looking for it, always. Every trader, every scout had a description, for years." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "The woman he entrusted it to, who was she?" Maya's face shut down immediately, a curtain drawn. She shook her head, taking a step back toward the door. "I shouldn't be talking. Lena said just to bring the food. Please, I need to understand. He thinks I stole it." "Did you?" The question wasn't accusatory, just bewildered. "No, I documented it. It was donated like everything else. I have the ledger entry, the donor code." The frustration boiled over. "I'm an archivist. We preserve things, we don't steal." She studied me for a long moment, conflict in her gaze. "She was important," Maya finally said, the words barely audible. "From another pack. It's all old history, bad history." And then the crest was just gone. Her eyes flicked to my bare throat. "And now you have it, had it. It doesn't make sense." Before I could ask more, the sound of raised voices from the clearing outside cut through the twilight. Maya hurried to the door, peeking out. I rushed to my sliver of window. Ian had returned. He stood in the center of the clearing, backlit by torchlight that was being hastily lit. Lena was at his side, and James stood rigidly a few paces away, his head bowed. A group of other pack members, warriors by their bearing, gathered around. Ian's voice, though I couldn't make out the words, was a low, angry rumble that carried across the distance. He pointed at James, then gestured sharply toward the longhouse. James's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in seething resentment before he turned and stopped. Ian watched him go, then ran a hand over his face. Even from here, I could see the exhaustion in the line of his shoulders. The political crisis was here, now. The Accords had been invoked. His focus should be entirely on his border, on his pack. Yet he had locked me here, a puzzle he couldn't solve. Maya slipped out, bolting the door behind her. I was alone again with the stew and the silence. I ate mechanically, the food tasteless. The high window showed stars now, sharp and cold. The pack's activity didn't slow. If anything, it intensified. Shadows of runners moved between buildings. The sense of a community preparing for a threat was palpable. It was deep in the night when the bolt slid again. I was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, but I sat up instantly. Ian filled the doorway. He'd shed his outer jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked older in the faint moonlight from the window, the lines around his eyes etched deep. He carried a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. He didn't enter fully, just leaned against the doorframe, his presence sucking the air from the room. "The Pine Ridge Alpha demands James's head on a pike," he said, his voice flat. "Or, barring that, his exile and the ceding of the Western Meadowlands, for the violation of the Accords on neutral ground." I said nothing. There was nothing for me to say. My pack is divided. Some think James was right to be vigilant, even if his methods were excessive. Others see the cost. His gaze, heavy and intent, landed on me. "And in the middle of this, I have you, wearing a ghost. I've told you everything I know," I whispered. You've told me facts, ledger entries, donor codes. He pushed off the doorframe and took 2 steps into the room. That's not what I need. How did it feel when you put it on? The question was so personal, so invasive, it stole my breath. It was beautiful. It felt like mine. It felt like it belonged on my skin. The confession tumbled out, raw and honest. I never meant to claim anything that wasn't mine. But from the moment I found it, it felt like a part of me I'd been missing. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He unwrapped the bundle in his hands. The moon crest lay on the cloth, the silver gleaming dully. He didn't touch it, just stared at it as if it were a live coal. She said the same thing. The day I gave it to her. The unnamed woman, the heart of the old, bad history. Who was she? I dared to ask. His eyes lifted to mine, and the pain in them was so naked it was a physical force. Her name was Alara. She was a Pine Ridge Omega. The pieces slammed together with dizzying force. Pine Ridge. The pack now mobilizing against him. The bad history. It was a bridge, he said, the words dragged from him. A promise, a hope for something more than border skirmishes and grudges. The crest was my vow, my trust. His hand clenched into a fist beside the pendant. A month later, she was gone. And the crest with her. No note, no trace. Her pack accused me of driving her away, or worse. Mine accused hers of deception and theft. The Meadowlands dispute started that year. The hatred festered, and the crest became a legend. He fell silent, the weight of years of suspicion and grief pressing down on him. I understood now. My wearing it wasn't just cultural theft. To his pack, it was a taunt. To him, it was the resurrection of a betrayal he'd carried for decades. And to Pine Ridge, seeing it on an unknown Omega, it could be interpreted as a deliberate, brutal provocation. The donor, I said, my mind racing. The one who gave the box to the archives. It was an anonymous donation, but there's a code. ALR-7. We could trace it, if you let me back to the archives. It's too late for tracing, he interrupted, his voice hardening back into the alphas. The sighting has been reported by my own enforcers, by James. He said the name like a curse. The pack knows you had it. Pine Ridge will know by dawn if they don't already. You wearing it now, it changes the old story. It makes it active. It makes you a player. Fear, cold and sharp, finally pierced the shell of my shock. What does that mean? It means, he said, picking up the pendant by its chain. It swung, a hypnotic silver arc, that you are no longer just a question for me. You are evidence, a piece on the board. For my pack, for Pine Ridge, for the Accords Council. He stepped closer, holding the crest out. It dangled between us. And evidence needs to be presented. You're going to give it back to them. The thought was a sudden, surprising lance of loss. No, his eyes held mine. You are. Before I could process his words, he moved behind me. I flinched, but he simply lifted the chain. The cool silver settled against my sternum once more, the familiar weight both a comfort and a brand. He fastened the clasp, his fingers brushing the nape of my neck, making every hair on my body stand on end. What are you doing? My hand flew up to clutch the crest. He stepped back around to face me. Tomorrow, at the border conclave called under the Accords, you will stand before the Pine Ridge Alpha. You will wear the crest, and you will tell them exactly what you told me, how you found it. Where? They'll never believe me, I breathed. They'll think it's a trick, a Stone Peak ploy. Probably, he agreed, his expression grim. But your testimony, your provenance, is the only counter I have to their demands for blood and land. It reintroduces the mystery of Alara. It shifts the focus from James's crime to an older one. It might buy time, or it might ignite. He was using me as a shield, as a distraction, as a spark. The full reality of my position crashed down. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was a weapon to be deployed. And if it ignites everything, I asked. For the first time, something like apology flickered in his steely gaze, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Then you are in the heart of the fire, archivist, just like the rest of us. He turned to leave. Ian, the use of his name stopped him. You loved her. He didn't turn around. His shoulders went rigid. The silence stretched, so long I thought he wouldn't answer. I trusted her, he finally said, the words hollow. It amounted to the same thing. He left. The bolt slid home with a finality that echoed in my bones. I sank onto the bed, the crest heavy and alive against my skin. I was to be paraded before a hostile pack, the living, breathing symbol of their lost daughter and a decades-old betrayal. Ian's plan was desperate, dangerous, and placed me direct as the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the high window. A new sound joined the morning birdsong. The distant, mournful howl of a wolf from the direction of the Pine Ridge border. It was answered by another, closer, from the edge of the Stone Peak clearing. A call and response. A challenge. And I was to walk into the space between them wearing the moon. Subscribe now to follow Victoria's journey into the heart of the conflict. What do you think happened to Alara? Share your theories in the comments below. The polished silver of the moon crest felt unnaturally cold against my skin. Ian had just placed it back around my neck, his plan laid bare. I was to be his evidence, his living exhibit of a decades-old mystery, walked out before two hostile packs. The weight of it was worse than before. You will stand beside me, Ian said, his voice low and final. You will tell the truth of where you found it, nothing more, nothing less. And if they don't believe me, I asked, my fingers instinctively curling around the pendant. It felt like a target. His gaze was flint. Then the conclave fails, and we are at war by sundown. Your part in it will be over. He turned and left the cabin, the bolt sliding home with a sound of grim finality. I was alone again, but not for long. The pack's energy shifted palpably outside. Shouts, running feet, the scent of pine and aggression thickening the air. They were preparing for the conclave. I sat on the cot, trying to steady my breathing. I was an archivist. I dealt in facts, in dusty ledgers and quiet contemplation. Not in border disputes and ancient betrayals played out with teeth. The door unbolted. It was Lena, her expression as sharp and unwelcoming as ever. She carried a bundle of dark cloth. Change, she ordered, tossing it onto the cot. It was a simple, high-necked dress of charcoal gray wool, sturdy and plain. Not Archives robes. It was pack clothing. You will not go before the alphas looking like a stray scholar. You will look like what you are. And what is that? I asked, defiance a thin shield, her lip curled. A question, one my alpha seems determined to answer. Be quick, the escort is waiting. She left and I changed. The dress was slightly too large, but it was warm. It made me feel like a costume, an actor donning a role for a play I'd never read. I kept the pendant outside the fabric, its Moonand Mountain face gleaming dully. My escort was James and two other enforcers I didn't know. James's eyes burned with a hatred so pure it was almost fascinating. The bandage on his arm from Ian's disciplinary bite was prominent. He said nothing, only jerked his head for me to follow. We moved through the heart of Stone Peak. The clearing was a hive of tense activity. Warriors gathered, checking weapons, their faces set in grim. They watched me pass, a ripple of whispers following in my wake. My name was not mentioned. I was an object, a sudden variable in a long-standing equation. We did not head for the border path I'd arrived by. Instead, we took a narrower, older trail that climbed a rocky bluff overlooking the disputed meadowlands. At the summit, a flat expanse of stone formed a natural platform. Ian was already there, standing at the edge, looking down. A dozen of his senior pack members flanked him, Leno. To the east, I could see movement in the tree line, dark shapes, many of them. Pine Ridge. And in the meadow below, a small, open space had been cleared. A single, ancient stump stood in the center, a traditional neutral meeting point. The air itself felt charged, brittle. "Stay here until you are called," James muttered, shoving me toward a cluster of boulders at the back of the bluff. He and the other enforcers positioned themselves around me, a living cage. From this vantage, I had a terrifyingly clear view of everything. Two figures emerged from the Pine Ridge tree line. One was a massive, broad-shouldered alpha with a russet beard. Alpha Gareth, I presumed. The other, walking stiffly but with determined pride, was Calvin, his arm in a sling. My heart clenched. They were followed by a contingent of their own warriors, who fanned out opposite the meadow from Stone Peak's contingent. Ian descended with his group, meeting Gareth at the central stump. The formalities were brief, voices too low to carry. But the posture was clear, two apex predators circling. I saw Gareth gesture angrily toward Calvin. Ian's response was calm, controlled. Then he turned and looked directly up at the bluff. He raised a hand. James's hand clamped on my upper arm. "Now, walk." The path down was a blur of gravel and focused fear. Every eye from both packs was on me as I was marched into the meadow. The scent of mistrust and old blood was overwhelming. I was brought to stand slightly behind and to the left of Ian, facing Alpha Gareth and Calvin. Calvin's eyes widened in shock when he saw me, then narrowed in confusion as they dropped to the pendant on my chest. "This," Ian's voice rang out, clear and commanding, "is Victoria of the Lunar Archives. She is the reason your pup was trespassing near our borders. He was following her scent, drawn by this." Ian's finger pointed unerringly at the moon crest. Gareth's furious gaze swept over me. "An unaffiliated Omega? This is your defense for an assault on my pack member." "It is context," Ian countered, his tone like iron. "She wears the moon crest of Stone Peak, my crest, lost for over 20 years. Your pup recognized its power. He was curious. His method was foolish, and my enforcer's response was excessive and has been punished. But the root of this incident is not a border skirmish. It is this." He turned to me. "Archivist, tell them where you found the crest." All that training, the discipline of citing sources, of relaying fact without emotion, was the only thing that kept my voice from shaking. "I am a researcher at the Lunar Archives. Approximately 8 years ago, a collection of unsorted artifacts was donated from a liquidated estate. The crest was among them. It was catalogued as an item of unknown metallic composition and obscure. I felt a connection to it. A murmur ran through both packs. "A convenient story," Gareth sneered. "You expect us to believe the lost Alpha's crest just turned up in a box of junk. The archives receive such donations from across the territories," I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "It is not uncommon for pack heirlooms to be lost to time and mortal estates. The Accords guarantee our neutrality. I have no allegiance to Stone Peak." "Yet you stand with its Alpha now," Calvin spoke up, his young voice tight with pain. "I stand where I was brought under guard," I corrected quietly and saw a flicker in Ian's jaw. Gareth took a step closer, his focus drilling into the pendant. "Let me see it." Ian gave a slight nod. Hands trembling, I lifted the chain over my head. For a terrifying second, I held it out, suspended between the two alphas. Gareth took it from me. He examined it, his rough fingers tracing the mountains, testing the weight. His expression shifted from anger to something deeper, more troubled. He looked from the crest to Ian, and then his eyes shot to his own pack's ranks. A figure stepped forward from the Pine Ridge warriors. It was an older Omega woman, her hair a steely gray, her face lined with grief and a fierce intelligence. She moved with a quiet authority that made the warriors part for her. She came to stand beside Gareth, her eyes locked on the crest in his hand. "Ilara's mother," Ian said, and the name hung in the air like a ghost. Mara. Mara did not look at Ian. She only held out her hand to Gareth. He placed the crest in her palm. She closed her fingers around it, her eyes shutting tight. A long, silent moment passed. When she opened them, they were glistening, but her voice was steady as stone. "This is it. This is the one I crafted for my daughter." She looked at me, and her gaze was not hostile, but piercing. "You said it came from a liquidated estate. Can you describe the other items?" My mind raced, scrambling through years of dusty memory. There was a set of silver brushes, a music box that played a warped melody, several books of poetry, water-damaged, a locket with a painted miniature of a woman with dark hair. I saw Mara flinch. And a man's signet ring, stamped with a sheaf of... Mara's breath hitched. She looked at Gareth, then at Ian, her face pale. The brushes were a coming-of-age gift from her aunt. The music box was from her father, the locket that was her. Her fingers tightened on the crest. The estate was mine. My sister's. She handled Ilara's affairs after the disappearance. She turned her devastating gaze fully on Ian. "You gave this to her. You swore it was a vow." "A bridge. Where is my daughter, Alpha?" The accusation exploded in the clearing. Pine Ridge warriors growled, stepping forward. Stone Peak muscles tensed, ready to... Ian stood utterly still, but I saw the tremor that ran through his hands before he clenched them into fists. "I gave her the crest as a promise," he said, his voice raw with a decades-old anguish. "I sent 2 of my best enforcers with her to escort her back to you for a formal visit. They never reached the border. All 3 vanished. We found traces of a struggle near the Blackwater ravine. Scents we didn't recognize. Not wolf, not human." He looked at Mara, and for the first time I saw the Alpha's mask crack completely, revealing a bottomless well of guilt and fury. "I have searched for her, and for answers every day since. I believed, for a long time, I believed your pack thought I had betrayed her." The revelation stunned the meadow into silence. The feud wasn't just over a stolen crest or a broken alliance. It was founded on mutual, agonizing loss and a terrible, shared misunderstanding. Gareth was the first to recover, his voice gravelly. "We found one of your enforcer's belts, shredded on our side of the ravine. We believed it was a cover for... It was a message," Ian said, the wolf rising in his tone. "But not from me, from something else, something that took them all." The political confrontation had just shattered, revealing the raw, historical wound beneath. The tension was no longer about a meadow or an enforcer's zeal. It was about 3 missing souls. Mara stared at the crest in her hand, then slowly, deliberately, she walked over to me. She took my hand and pressed the pendant back into it. "It called to you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It has power. It remembers." She loved him, you know. She looked at me, her ancient eyes searching mine. "You wear her hope." Before I could respond, a sharp, ululating cry echoed from the Stone Peak bluff. A sentinel. He was pointing north, away from the meadow, toward the dense, untamed wilderness that belonged to no pack. Everyone turned. A column of strange, oily smoke was rising above the tree line, a sickly yellow against the gray sky. It was not the clean smoke of a campfire. "Where is that?" Gareth barked. Ian's another cry, this one from the northeastern Pine Ridge sentry post. A howl of alarm. A warrior came crashing into the far edge of the meadow, shifting mid-sprint into his human form, blood streaking his side. "Alpha," he gasped, falling to his knees before Gareth. "Scouts, our eastern patrol, they're gone, just gone. We found this tangled in the thorns." He held up a tattered scrap of cloth. It was dark, unfamiliar fabric, and stitched onto it was a crude, fraying symbol. a crescent moon pierced by a thorned vine. No one recognized it, but everyone felt the new, chilling Ian and Gareth shared a single, instantaneous look. The decades of hostility between them were not gone, but they were violently shoved aside by this new, immediate threat. An unknown enemy, striking from the shadows of the very place Alara had vanished. When Ian's head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing with a terrifying, dawning realization. "The crest," he growled. "It's not just a memory, it's a beacon. And you've been wearing it out in the open for everyone to sense." The implications slammed into me. I had not just been a piece of political theater. I had been live bait, and something had just taken the hook. The symbol carved into the sentry's report was a crude, vicious thing. A crescent moon pierced by a thorned vine. It meant nothing to me, but the way both alphas froze, their shared rage dissolving into a cold, familiar dread, told me everything. The past wasn't just a story. Blackwater, Ian said, the word a low growl that silenced the clearing. He looked from the report in his hand to the moon crest, which he still held. Then his eyes, sharp and calculating, landed on me. "The crest is a beacon, and you lit it." Gareth of Pine Ridge stepped forward, his earlier bluster gone, replaced by a grim focus. "My daughter carried that crest into Blackwater Ravine. She never came out. Now, after decades of silence, this mark returns the moment it resurfaces." He glared at Ian, but it was a glare of alliance, not accusation. "Your theory holds, Stone Peak." "We go, now," Ian commanded, his voice brooking no argument. He pointed at James and several other Stone Peak enforcers. "You, with me. Gareth, bring your best trackers. We meet at the ravine's edge in 1 hour." His gaze swept back to me. "She comes." "The Omega," Gareth. "The beacon," Ian corrected, his tone leaving no room for debate. "If this thing is drawn to the crest's energy, having it, and her, present might draw it out, or at least confirm its focus. The idea of being used as bait again, this time for something that had made entire patrols vanish, sent a chill through my core. But the alternative, staying in this cabin, ignorant while others faced the danger my ignorance had helped awaken, was worse. I found my voice, though it was thin. The journey to Blackwater Ravine was a silent, grim procession. I was placed in the center of the group, flanked by Maya, who gave me a tense, apologetic look, and a hulking Pine Ridge warrior. The forest grew darker, the pines giving way to gnarled, ancient trees that choked out the sunlight. The air grew damp and cold, carrying the distant, dank smell of stagnant. We reached the edge of the ravine as the last light of day bled from the sky. It was a jagged tier in the world, a steep slope of loose shale and twisted roots leading down into a mist-shrouded gloom. On a mossy stone at the head of the path, the same thorned crescent symbol had been freshly scored. "Here," a Pine Ridge tracker said, his voice hushed. "The last trace of the missing patrol. Then nothing." Ian and Gareth stood shoulder to shoulder, peering down into the abyss. The history between them, the decades of blame and bitterness, seemed to shrink in the face of this older, darker mystery. "Alara came this way," Gareth murmured, not to Ian but to the ravine itself. "On a path of peace, bearing your symbol. And something was waiting," Ian finished. He turned, holding out the moon crest pendant. Its silver caught the dying light, glowing faintly. He didn't look at me with anger now, but with a ruthless pragmatism. "Put it on." My hands trembled as I took it. The metal was warm from his grip. As the familiar weight settled against my sternum, a strange sensation bloomed. A low, resonant hum that vibrated in my bones, not heard, but felt. I gasped. "What is it?" Ian was immediately alert. "It's active. It feels good," he said, though his expression was anything but happy. "Then we know it's working. You stay close to me. Everyone else fan out. Weapons ready. We are not hunting prey, we are walking into a trap. Let's spring it on our terms. We descended into the ravine. The mist clung to us, cold and wet. The moon crest's hum grew stronger, a steady pulse that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. The deeper we went, the more the feeling intensified, a pulling sensation in my chest, guiding me forward like a dowsing rod. "Victoria," Ian said softly from beside me. "You're leading, don't follow." I let the subtle tug guide my feet, veering off the main wash of the ravine onto a narrow game trail. The others followed, a tense, breathing wall of muscle and weaponry at my back. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel and the ragged sound of my own breathing. The trail ended at a cave mouth, half hidden by a curtain of thick, thorny vines. The symbol was carved above the entrance. The hum from the pendant became a sharp, insistent thrum, almost painful. "This is the place," I said, my voice echoing weakly in the dense air. Ian nodded, his jaw tight. He gave a series of swift, silent hand signals. Enforcers from both packs melted into the shadows surrounding the cave. He, Gareth, James, and 2 others closed in around me. We go in. The cave was not a natural formation. The walls were too smooth, the passage too straight. It descended sharply, and a faint, phosphorescent fungus provided an eerie greenish light. The air smelled of damp earth, metal, and something else, something old and sour like forgotten herbs. The walls were lined with niches, and in each niche was a still, silent figure. Some were in modern patrol leathers, eyes wide and unseeing. Others wore older styles, their clothing faded. My gaze was dragged to the center of the cavern. There, on a stone slab, lay the remains of a woman in a simple, rotted dress, a faded pine ridge insignia barely visible on the sleeve. Beside her skeletal hand was an empty, velvet-lined box. "Ilara," Gareth choked out, the word a sob of agony and relief. But Ian was looking past the remains at the back of the cavern. "What is this?" It was a construct, an altar of sorts, made of woven black branches and sharpened stones. At its apex was a large, rough crystal that pulsed with a sickly violet light, and the light seemed to be feeding on lines of silvery energy that were being drawn from the figures in the niches. A thin, shimmering strand of that same energy was stretching across the cavern, connecting the crystal directly to the moon crest pendant on my chest. I felt a draining pull, a cold leaching of warmth from my core into the crystal. I stumbled. "It's a siphon," I gasped, clutching the crest. "It's been drawing power from her, from all of them, and now from me." A figure detached itself from the shadows behind the altar. It was tall, unnaturally slender, its form obscured by a cloak of woven bark and leaves. Its face was elongated, its eyes solid orbs of the same violet light as the crystal. It made a sound like rustling leaves and cracking. "The beacon returns," it hissed, its voice echoing in multiple pitches. "The little moon calls and the hungry earth answers. You bring the key to finish the harvest." "What are you?" Ian roared, shifting partially, his claws extended. "The caretaker, the reaper. This place is a well of life," the creature rasped, gesturing to the crystal. "Your kind burns so brightly. We preserve, we sustain." The female with the shining key was the first gift. She kept the well fed for many turnings of the moon. But she faded. We needed a new key. You brought it to us. Understanding, horrific and complete, crashed over me. Ilara hadn't been betrayed. She'd been harvested. The crest wasn't just a political symbol. It was a magical focus, and she'd been lured here and trapped, her life essence slowly drained to power this thing's crystal. My wearing it, activating it after decades of dormancy, "Let her go," Ian commanded, stepping in front of me, his body a shield between me and the creature. "The key is bound. The harvest has begun," the creature said, and the violet light flared. The pulling sensation at my chest became a yanking agony. I cried out, my knees buckling. That cry was the trigger. With a unified snarl, the werewolves attacked. It was chaos. The creature moved with impossible speed, its limbs elongating into whip-like branches. Gareth, with a howl of paternal fury, launched himself at the altar. Ian stayed rooted before me, a furious guardian, swatting away. James and the others engaged the creature directly, but their claws and strength seemed less effective against its wooden flesh. I saw James get flung against a wall with a sickening crack. The pain in my chest was spiking, the silvery tether from the crest to the crystal glowing brighter. I was the battery now. I looked from the crystal to the draining tether to Ian's broad back as he fought. The answer was simple and terrible. I couldn't break the tether, but I could move the source. Gritting my teeth against the draining sensation, I lurched forward, not away from the crystal, but toward it. I ducked under Ian's arm before he could stop me. "Victoria, no!" I stumbled to the base of the twisted altar. The crystal pulsed above me, vile and hungry. I wrapped both hands around the moon crest. Its familiar contours, the object I'd cherished for years, now felt like a parasite. I didn't try to take it off. I put all my will, all my fading strength into a single, focused thought. Stop. I slammed the pendant, and with it the entirety of the silvery tether of energy, directly into the heart of the violet crystal. There was a sound like shattering glass and a deafening silence. The violet light exploded outwards in a wave of force that threw me back. I landed in a heap, the wind knocked out of me. The crystal was dark. The tether was gone. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure, desolate loss. It staggered, its form withering, the violet light in its eyes guttering out. With a final, rustling sigh, it collapsed into a pile of desiccated bark and dust. The cavern was still. The phosphorescent I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The moon crest lay on my chest, inert and silent, just a piece of silver again. The draining cold was gone, replaced by a deep, bone-weary emptiness. Ian was at my side in an instant, his hands on my shoulders, his face etched with a fear I'd never seen in him before. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, unable to speak. He helped me to my feet. Around us, the pack warriors were stirring, tending to their wounded. James was sitting up, groaning. Gareth was kneeling by his daughter's remains, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with silent grief, but the rage was gone. Only sorrow. Ian looked from Alara's resting place, to the fallen creature, to the dormant crystal, and finally to me. The truth was laid bare, ugly and complete. The enemy had never been the pack across the border. It had been this ancient, parasitic thing, feeding on their conflict and their lives. "It's over," I whispered. "No," Ian said, his voice rough. He gently, deliberately reached out and closed his hand over the pendant where it lay against my skin. His touch was not possessive, but protective. "It's just beginning, but the war is done. The real one anyway." He turned to Gareth, who looked up, his face aged by grief and clarity. "We take our dead home," Ian said. "All of them, and we seal this tomb forever." Gareth gave a slow, heavy nod. "Together." In the days that followed, the ravine was sealed. The bodies of the lost, including Alara, were recovered and returned to their packs for proper rites. The story of the real enemy was told. Dismantling the foundation of the decades-long, I was returned to the Lunar Archives, escorted by Ian himself. Faith rushed out to meet me, her face pale with worry. The cabin at Stone Peak felt like a lifetime ago. Ian stood at the edge of the Archives grove, the neutral territory once again a barrier between our worlds. He didn't try to cross it. "The Accord's conclave is concluded," he said formally. "Pine Ridge has withdrawn its claims. James is stripped of his rank for his assault, and Stone Peak will make reparations. The matter is settled. I nodded, clutching my shawl around me. The absence of the pendant's weight was still strange. He was silent for a long moment. "It is a relic of a failed hope," he said finally. "But it is also a pack treasure and a dangerous artifact." His eyes met mine, and the intensity in them was no longer fury, but something more complex. "You were right. It was never yours to keep. But you were also wrong. It did belong with you for a time." He turned to go, then paused. "The archives will always have the friendship of Stone Peak, Victoria, and so will you." He left then, melting into the trees. I stood there until Faith came and led me inside, back to the quiet world of ledgers and dust. The world was restored, the mystery solved, the peace forged. But sometimes, in the deep silence of the archives, I place my hand on my chest where the silver crest once lay. I don't feel a hum. I feel an echo. And I know, with a certainty that settles deep in my researcher's soul, that some stories end not with a period, but with a question mark that lingers, quiet and waiting, in the space between heartbeats. Thank you for journeying into the world of the Lunar Archives and the Stone Peak Pack. If this tale of lost crests and found truths resonated with you, please share it with another reader who loves a twist of fantasy and mystery.